The airport was a whirlwind of movement, suitcases rolling, voices blending into an indistinct hum, and hurried footsteps echoing against the polished floors. Among the crowd, Emma Carter stood on her tiptoes, scanning the sea of people with hopeful eyes. Her heart pounded with excitement. Her older brother, Liam, was finally coming home after months away, and she had missed him more than she could put into words. She spotted a tall, broad-shouldered figure with dark hair walking toward the exit. That's him. Relief flooded through her as she rushed forward, weaving through the crowd, barely noticing the people she brushed past. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him, pressing her face into his chest. "Oh my God, Liam, I missed you so much," she mumbled, squeezing him tightly. But something was off. Instead of her brother's familiar scent, she was met with a crisp, sophisticated cologne. Deep, woodsy, and expensive. The arms around her didn't move, frozen in place as if their owner wasn't sure how to react. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Her brother always hugged back immediately. A sinking realization settled in her stomach. Slowly, hesitantly, she lifted her head and looked up. This was not Liam. The man staring down at her was a stranger, and not just any stranger. He was devastatingly handsome, with sharp chiseled features and striking gray eyes that held an unreadable expression. His suit was impeccably tailored, fitting his tall frame perfectly. Everything about him screamed power, confidence, and wealth. And right now, he looked utterly bewildered. A wave of sheer panic hit Emma. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Then, as if her brain had caught up all at once, she stumbled backward, mortified. "Oh no! Oh my God! I I hugged the wrong person. Naikaindonish." Her voice came out higher than she intended, her hands flying up in sheer embarrassment. The man remained silent for a second longer, then arched an eyebrow. "Well," he said, his deep voice carrying an amused edge, "this is definitely not how I expected my day to start." Emma groaned, covering her face with both hands. "I'm so sorry. I thought you were my brother. You look like him. From the back, I mean. Oh God, this is humiliating." The corner of his mouth twitched. "So, do strangers just randomly hug you at airports, or am I the lucky first?" His teasing only made her embarrassment worse. "No, I mean, yes. I mean, ugh, never mind." She took another step back, barely resisting the urge to run. At that moment, a tall, intimidating man in a black suit appeared beside the stranger. "Mr. Callahan, is everything all right?" The man's voice was clipped, professional, a bodyguard. Mr. Callahan. The name sent alarm bells ringing in Emma's head. Her eyes widened in horror. Ethan Callahan, the billionaire CEO of Callahan Enterprises. The ruthless businessman whose name dominated financial headlines. The man known for making or breaking companies with a single decision. And she had just thrown herself at him in the middle of an airport. Emma wanted to die. She swallowed hard. Oh no. Ethan watched her reaction, clearly amused. "Ah, so you do know who I am." Emma nodded weakly. I I may have seen your face in a few business magazines." Ethan smirked. "I should hope so. They do insist on printing them often." She let out a nervous laugh, unsure what to do. "Right. Well, again, I'm so sorry. This was a complete mistake. I'm just going to disappear now. Forever." She turned sharply, ready to flee, but Ethan's voice stopped her. "Wait." Emma froze. She turned back, confused. Why? Ethan tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. "Tell me something, Miss Carter," she answered automatically. "Emma Carter." "Miss Carter," he continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "Are you always this enthusiastic when greeting people?" She blinked rapidly. Was he was he teasing her? "No!" she exclaimed, exasperated. "Like I said, I thought you were my brother. It was an honest mistake." Ethan hummed as if he wasn't entirely convinced. "Shame. It was quite a nice welcome." Emma gaped at him. Was he flirting with her? The bodyguard cleared his throat, looking between them. "Sir, your car is waiting." Ethan nodded but didn't move. His gray eyes remained on Emma. "Perhaps I'll see you again, Miss Carter," he said smoothly, his tone unreadable. Emma wasn't sure if that was a statement or a challenge. She swallowed. Um, Unlikely. Ethan simply smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his lips, before turning and walking away. His bodyguard followed, leaving Emma standing there, utterly dazed. Her brain finally started working again. She just humiliated herself in front of a billionaire. She needed to get out of there before fate decided to punish her further. Then, as if the universe had a terrible sense of humor, she heard a voice behind her. "Emma?" She turned to see Liam, her actual brother, standing there with his suitcase, looking completely confused. "Who was that guy?" he asked, frowning. Emma let out a long-suffering groan. "No one. Just a very, very bad mistake." Liam raised an eyebrow, but didn't question it further. "Come on, let's go home." Emma nodded quickly, eager to erase this moment from her memory forever. But as she followed her brother through the crowd, she had a sinking feeling that this wasn't the last time she'd see Ethan Callahan. And for some reason, that terrified her. Emma spent the next few days trying to forget about her humiliating airport encounter with Ethan Callahan. Unfortunately, her brain refused to cooperate. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still see the amusement in his gray eyes, the smirk that tugged at his lips, the way he had looked at her like she was some kind of mystery he wanted to solve. It was infuriating. She needed to move on. Thankfully, work at the Corner Brew Cafe was the perfect distraction. The small coffee shop, tucked away near the business district, wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. After her parents had passed, she and Liam had struggled to keep it running. It had been tough, but Emma had refused to let it go under. The cafe was her home, her passion, and every long shift was a reminder that she was fighting for something important. That morning, she tied her apron around her waist, pulled her hair into a messy bun, and got to work behind the counter. The morning rush was in full swing. Regular customers lined up for their daily caffeine fix. The scent of fresh pastries filled the air, and the espresso machine hummed in the background. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. Because at precisely 9 a.m., the front door swung open, and in walked Ethan Callahan. Emma nearly dropped the ceramic mug she was holding. He looked just as polished as he had at the airport, dressed in a crisp navy suit that probably cost more than the cafe's entire monthly rent. His presence commanded attention. Conversations slowed, heads turned, and even her coworker Mia nudged her with wide eyes. Emma, on the other hand, felt like she was having a minor heart attack. Why was he here? Was this some kind of sick joke? Ethan's gaze swept over the cafe, scanning the room like he was assessing a business deal. Then, his eyes landed on her. Emma's stomach twisted. With a small, knowing smirk, he strode toward the counter and stopped directly in front of her. "Good morning, Miss Carter," he said smoothly. "Lovely place you have here." Emma's brain went into full meltdown mode. He remembered her name. He was standing right in front of her counter. And worst of all, he was enjoying this. Uh... She cleared her throat, forcing herself to act normal. What? What are you doing here?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Ordering coffee, of course. Isn't that what cafes are for?" She narrowed her eyes. "You own half the city. There are at least a dozen high-end coffee shops near your office. Why are you here?" His lips twitched. "Perhaps I was curious about the place." Emma folded her arms. "Or perhaps you're just here to mess with me." Ethan chuckled, looking far too entertained. "Now why would I do that?" Before she could answer, Mia, her co-worker and hopeless romantic, suddenly appeared at her side, practically vibrating with excitement. "Welcome to Corner Brew, sir. What can we get for you?" Mia asked, her tone much too cheerful. Ethan glanced at the menu for a brief second, before turning his gaze back to Emma. "I'll have whatever she recommends." Emma let out a quiet groan. He was doing this on purpose. Fine. Two could play this game. With a polite, professional smile, she grabbed a cup and scribbled something on the side before handing it to Mia. "One extra bitter black coffee, no sugar." Mia blinked. "Oh, are you sure? Most people prefer—" Emma gave her a look. "Trust me, it's perfect for him." Mia shrugged and walked away to prepare the drink. Ethan, to his credit, didn't look fazed. He leaned slightly against the counter, watching her with a quiet intensity that made Emma deeply uncomfortable. "You seem determined to punish me," he mused. Emma crossed her arms. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ethan's smirk widened. "An extra bitter coffee? No sugar? Sounds a little personal." She lifted her chin. "I thought billionaires liked things strong and expensive." "Fair enough," he said, still looking far too amused. A minute later, Mia returned and handed Ethan his coffee. He took a sip, pausing for a moment as the bitterness hit his tongue. Emma waited. Ethan hummed thoughtfully. "Not bad. Strong. Bold. Leaves a lasting impression. Just like you, Miss Carter." Emma's face heated. Oh no. No, no, no. He was not charming her right now. Mia let out a small squeal under her breath. Emma shot her a warning glare before turning back to Ethan. "Are you done?" "Not quite." He set his coffee down on the counter. "I have a proposition for you." Emma froze. Oh, this couldn't be good. "A proposition?" she repeated suspiciously. "What kind of proposition?" Ethan slid a business card toward her. "I'm hosting a private charity gala this Saturday. I need a reliable catering service, and I hear your cafe has some of the best pastries in the area." Emma stared at the card. Her cafe? Catering for a billionaire's gala? That wasn't just out of her league. It was out of her universe. "You want me to cater for your event?" she asked, skeptical. Ethan nodded. "I'd like you to prepare a selection of pastries and desserts for my guests. Of course, you'll be paid generously for your time." Emma hesitated. Why us? There are professional catering companies that— "I don't trust them," Ethan interrupted smoothly. "I prefer working with people who take pride in their craft. And based on what I've seen today, I'd say you do." Emma narrowed her eyes. "You saw me make 1 cup of coffee. And yet, it told me everything I need to know." She let out a deep breath. She wanted to say no. She really did. But the truth was, Her cafe needed this. Money was tight. Business had been slower than usual. And a high-profile event like this could change everything. Still, she didn't trust Ethan Callahan. Not one bit. "Let me think about it," she said finally. Ethan inclined his head. "I'll be expecting your answer soon." With one last knowing glance, he picked up his coffee and walked out the door, leaving Emma completely rattled. Mia grabbed her arm the second he was gone. "Emma," she hissed, "did you just get offered a catering deal by Ethan freaking Callahan?" Emma exhaled slowly. "I think I did." Mia shook her. "Do you realize what this means?" Yes. It meant Emma was now stuck in a dangerous game with a billionaire. And she had a feeling Ethan Callahan wasn't planning on letting her go anytime soon. Emma stared at Ethan Callahan's business card for the rest of the day, flipping it between her fingers like it held the answer to some impossible riddle. The offer was too good to ignore. Catering for a billionaire's gala? That kind of exposure could bring in a flood of new customers, maybe even enough to help her finally expand the cafe, upgrade the equipment, and breathe easier when rent was due. But there was one problem. Ethan Callahan wasn't just any client. He was a storm in a suit. Unpredictable and impossible to ignore. And Emma had the sinking feeling that if she stepped into his world, she'd never come out the same. "You're overthinking this." Emma snapped out of her thoughts to find Liam standing in the cafe's kitchen, arms crossed as he leaned against the counter. Her younger brother had a sharp mind and an even sharper instinct when it came to reading people. "I am not overthinking," she muttered. Liam raised an eyebrow. "So what's stopping you from saying yes?" She hesitated. "It's complicated." Liam snorted. "No, it's simple. You're scared of the guy." Emma scoffed. "I'm not scared." "Really?" "Because from what I saw, he's just a rich guy who happens to like our coffee. So either you take the job and let it help the cafe, or you let your stubbornness get in the way." Emma hated when he was right. She exhaled slowly. "Fine, I'll call him." With a deep breath, she grabbed her phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang once before a voice answered. "Miss Carter." Ethan's smooth baritone came through the speaker. "I had a feeling you'd call." Emma rolled her eyes. "Don't sound so smug. I'm only calling because this is good for my business." "Of course," he said, and she could hear the smirk in his voice. "So, is that a yes?" There was a pause. Emma sighed. "It's a yes." "Excellent. Be at Callahan Tower tomorrow at 2 p.m. We'll go over the details." "Wait, what? I thought this was just catering." "Every detail matters, Miss Carter. And if you're going to work with me, you'll have to get used to that." Before she could argue, he hung up. Emma pulled the phone away from her ear, staring at it in disbelief. Liam peeked over her shoulder. "You look like you just made a deal with the devil." Emma groaned. "That's because I did." The next afternoon, Emma stood in front of Callahan Tower, a glass and steel skyscraper that practically screamed wealth. She'd never felt more out of place. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The lobby was stunning. High ceilings, marble floors, a chandelier that probably cost more than her cafe's yearly income. "Miss Carter?" She turned to see a Packer man in a black suit. His expression neutral but professional. "Mr. Callahan is expecting you. This way, please." Emma followed him to the elevator, her nerves increasing with every floor they ascended. When the doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And there, standing by the window, was Ethan Callahan. He turned when she entered, his sharp gaze sweeping over her. Right on time, Emma crossed her arms. I didn't have a choice. Your assistant practically dragged me up here. Ethan chuckled. You'll find I like efficiency. She rolled her eyes, but didn't respond. He gestured to the large table at the center of the room, where a set of blueprints and event plans were laid out. Let's get down to business. Emma moved closer, glancing at the neatly organized papers. This seems excessive for a catering job. Ethan smirked. Nothing about my events is just catering. Every detail has to be perfect. Emma studied the plans, seeing the guest list, seating arrangements, even the food menu suggestions. Everything was meticulously curated. This is a high-profile event, Ethan continued, which means every single guest will be paying attention to the food. I need to know if you can handle that. Emma lifted her chin. I wouldn't have said yes if I couldn't. He held her gaze, then nodded. Good. Then let's talk specifics. For the next hour, they went over everything. How many desserts would be needed? The ingredients, the logistics of delivery. Ethan asked pointed questions, making sure she knew exactly what she was doing. Emma wasn't sure if he was testing her or trying to intimidate her. But she refused to back down. By the time they were done, Ethan leaned back, studying her. Bisan Sodunai. You're impressive, Miss Carter. Emma raised an eyebrow. You sound surprised. I am. He tilted his head. Most people hesitate around me. You don't. Emma folded her arms. Maybe that's because I don't see you as anything special. Ethan laughed. A real laugh. And for a second, she saw something in his expression. Something almost genuine. Well, he said, his amusement still lingering, I look forward to seeing what you can do. Emma exhaled. So, are we done here? Just one more thing. He walked to his desk, picked up an envelope beyond her manfour, and handed it to her. Emma hesitated before taking it. What is this? An advance payment, Ethan said simply. She blinked. Already? You don't think I'd ask you to prepare something this important without ensuring you had the resources, did you? Emma slowly opened the envelope, her eyes widening at the amount written on the check inside. It was more than she'd made in the last, what? 3 months combined. Her breath caught. This is too much. Ethan's expression didn't change. Consider it an investment in your business, in your talent. Emma stared at him. For a man who claimed he didn't trust people easily, he was certainly willing to invest in her. She exhaled sharply. I don't like feeling like I owe anyone. Ethan's lips curled into a smirk. Then don't let me down. Emma's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a catering job anymore. This was a challenge, and if there was one thing she never backed down from, it was a challenge. She grabbed the envelope, met his gaze, and nodded. I won't. Emma left Callahan Tower with the check burning a hole in her pocket and her thoughts in complete turmoil. She had expected this job to be stressful, maybe even frustrating, but she hadn't anticipated him. Ethan Callahan was a force of nature, sharp, calculating, and far too good at getting under her skin. She hated that about him, and she hated even more that, despite her irritation, She admired the way he commanded a room, how effortlessly he made decisions. He was used to power, used to control, and she had the sinking feeling that he was testing her in ways that went beyond just business. The next morning, she was already at the cafe before sunrise, rolling up her sleeves and throwing herself into work. If she was going to prove herself, then she would do it the way she always had, with hard work and perfection. Liam walked in just as she was finishing a batch of test recipes, yawning as he grabbed a coffee from the counter. "You're up early," he mumbled. Emma didn't look up from where she was carefully piping frosting onto a delicate tart. Big job, no time for sleep. Liam sipped his coffee, watching her with too much curiosity. This wouldn't have anything to do with a certain billionaire, would it? Emma groaned. "Don't start." "I'm just saying," Liam continued. "You're acting a little obsessed." "I am not obsessed," she snapped, placing the tart on a tray with more force than necessary. Liam smirked. "You sure? Because I heard you muttering, 'I'll show him,' in your sleep last night." Emma whirled around, narrowing her eyes. What?" He shrugged. "You do that when you're stressed. Like that time in high school when you wanted to prove that girl wrong about your baking." Emma's jaw tightened. "That's different." "Not really." Liam leaned against the counter. "Ethan Callahan is in your head." Emma refused to admit it. Instead, she picked up the tray of tarts and shoved it into Liam's hands. "Here, taste these. I don't have time for your theories." Liam chuckled but took a bite. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. "Okay, I take it back. Whatever's fueling this insanity is working. These are incredible." Emma smirked. "Good, because I have 3 more recipes to perfect before tomorrow's tasting." Liam sighed. "I take it back again. You are definitely obsessed." By the time the tasting at Callahan Tower rolled around the next afternoon, Emma was running on pure adrenaline. She walked into the penthouse office with a cart full of carefully prepared samples, every dish perfected to the last detail. Ethan was already there, leaning against his desk, flipping through some documents like he hadn't just summoned her here to impress him. He glanced up when she entered, his sharp gaze flicking from her face to the tray in her hands. Right on time, Emma set the samples down in front of him. "I don't believe in being late." Ethan smirked. "I noticed." She ignored the way her pulse picked up at the way he was looking at her, like she was some kind of puzzle he was trying to solve. Instead, she focused on the food. "This is the selection I came up with based on your event's theme," she said, lifting the lid from the tray to reveal an array of delicately crafted hors d'oeuvres and desserts. "I balanced flavors, textures, and aesthetics to fit the upscale environment you're aiming for." Ethan picked up a small tart and examined it with too much intensity. "You put a lot of thought into this." Emma folded her arms. "That's my job." He took a bite, and for a brief moment, something unreadable crossed his face. He swallowed, set the tart down, and said nothing. Emma frowned. "Well?" Ethan wiped his fingers with a napkin, meeting her gaze. "It's excellent." Emma waited. That was it? No critique? No smug comment about how she could do better? She had been prepared for a battle. Instead, he was just accepting it. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides. "You're not going to say anything else?" Ethan tilted his head, amused. "Would you rather I criticize it?" Emma clenched her jaw. "No, but you expected me to, didn't you?" He smirked. You wanted a fight. Emma felt a wave of irritation and something else she couldn't quite place. He was right. She had expected him to challenge her, to push her, and the fact that he wasn't was throwing her off balance. Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching her far too closely. You like proving people wrong, don't you? Emma narrowed her eyes. I like proving myself right. A slow, knowing smile spread across his lips. Same thing. She hated that he understood that about her. Before she could think of a response, Ethan turned back to the tray. Let's discuss logistics. How soon can you start preparing the full menu? Emma took a steadying breath and forced herself to focus. I'll need to finalize ingredient orders today. My team will start prepping by the weekend. Everything will be ready on time. Ethan nodded. Good. Emma glanced around the office. I assume you have a full kitchen staff for the event? Ethan's lips twitched. You assume wrong. Emma frowned. Excuse me? I don't trust just anyone with something this important, he said simply. Which is why I'm having you oversee everything personally. Emma stared at him. You want me to run the kitchen? Ethan nodded. I want you to make sure this event is flawless, which means you will be in charge. Emma's heart pounded. This was huge. This wasn't just catering. This was complete creative control over the entire event's dining experience. She could already hear Liam's voice in her head. You wanted a challenge, didn't you? Emma lifted her chin. Fine, but I'm going to need my best staff with me. Ethan didn't even hesitate. Consider it done. Emma exhaled, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and dread. This was going to be the biggest job of her career, and the most dangerous, because somewhere along the way, she was starting to realize that the real challenge wasn't just the food. It was Ethan Callahan, and the way he made her feel like she was walking on a tightrope between success and disaster. The week leading up to the event was a whirlwind of preparation, stress, and more time spent with Ethan Callahan than Emma had ever anticipated. She was at the venue before sunrise every day, organizing deliveries, managing her team, and ensuring that every detail was accounted for. She had always been meticulous, but this time she was on another level. Everything had to be perfect. And, of course, Ethan was always there. At first, she assumed he would be too busy to check in on the food preparations. A man like him had a million things to do, after all. But she quickly realized he was keeping a very close eye on everything. On her. One evening, after a particularly long day, Emma was still in the venue's kitchen, adjusting plating designs when she felt someone watching her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. You're still here, Ethan said, his voice smooth, but laced with something that almost sounded like amusement. Emma sighed, not looking up from the dish in front of her. Observant as always, Mr. Callahan. She heard him chuckle, then the sound of footsteps as he moved closer. You do realize most people would have gone home by now, don't you? Emma finally turned, crossing her arms. And you do realize that doesn't apply to me? Ethan smirked. Yes, that's why I'm here. She frowned. What? He shrugged, leaning against the counter. I figured if I left, you'd stay here all night trying to perfect something that's already excellent. Emma narrowed her eyes. I don't do things halfway. I know. His gray eyes held something unreadable, and it unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She turned back to the dish she had been adjusting, trying to ignore the fact that he was standing so ridiculously close. "You didn't answer my question," she said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Which one? Why are you here?" A pause. "Then, maybe I wanted to see how you handle pressure." Emma scoffed. "I thrive under pressure." Ethan tilted his head slightly, his gaze never wavering. "I noticed." There was something about the way he said it, slow, deliberate, that sent a spark of heat down her spine. She hated that she noticed it. Emma cleared her throat and focused on the plate in front of her. "If you came here just to test me, you're wasting your time." "Not a test," Ethan corrected. "Just curiosity." Emma set down the plating tweezers and finally looked at him again. "You don't strike me as the kind of man who does things out of simple curiosity." A slow smile spread across his lips. "No, I don't." The air between them shifted, the tension thick and charged. Emma hated it. Hated that this push and pull between them felt more like a game neither of them wanted to admit they were playing. She stepped back, needing distance. "The food will be ready on time. You don't need to check on me every 5 minutes." Ethan straightened, his gaze lingering on her for a moment, before he nodded. "I never doubted you." And then, just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing there with her heart racing for all the wrong reasons. The night of the event arrived faster than she expected. Emma had barely gotten a few hours of sleep the night before, but as she stepped into the grand ballroom of Callahan Tower, she felt a surge of adrenaline. The venue was breathtaking. Golden chandeliers, sleek modern decor, and an atmosphere that practically screamed exclusivity. Her team was already in the kitchen, executing the final touches on the menu. The scent of perfectly seasoned dishes filled the air, and Emma could already hear the murmurs of approval from the early guests as the first plates were served. She was in control. And yet, the moment Ethan entered the room, it felt like everything tilted slightly off balance. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit, looking every bit the powerful businessman that he was. But what unnerved her wasn't how good he looked. It was the fact that the moment his eyes found hers, he didn't look away. Emma swallowed, quickly turning back to her staff. "Table 3 needs their entrees," she instructed. "Let's keep everything moving." She needed to focus. She refused to let him be a distraction. But Ethan, it seemed, had other plans. Halfway through the night, as Emma was making her rounds, ensuring that every dish was coming out perfectly, she felt his presence before she saw him. "You've outdone yourself," Ethan said, standing beside her as they watched a group of guests react to their first bite of her food. Emma exhaled, forcing herself to stay professional. "I told you I would." His lips twitched. "That you did." She glanced up at him, narrowing her eyes. "Are you here to critique or compliment me?" Ethan's gaze darkened slightly. "Neither. Just appreciating the results." For some reason, that made her heart beat faster. Before she could overthink it, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Ethan!" Emma turned just in time to see a stunning woman approach them. Tall, blonde, elegant in a way that screamed old money. She smiled at Ethan, then glanced at Emma with thinly veiled curiosity. "And who is this?" Emma stiffened, instantly disliking the way the woman assessed her, like she was trying to place her in a category. Ethan's expression remained neutral. "Emma Carter, the mastermind behind tonight's menu." Something flickered in the woman's eyes. "Oh, You're the chef? Emma forced a polite smile. Yes. The woman's gaze turned dismissive. Impressive. Emma had seen that look before. She had been around enough wealthy, privileged people to recognize pity disguised as politeness. She knew exactly what this woman was thinking. She's just the help. Before Emma could respond, Ethan did something that shocked her. He turned to the woman and said, in a tone that left no room for argument, "She's not just the chef. She's the reason this entire night is a success." Emma's breath caught. The woman blinked, clearly taken aback. I, well, of course. She let out a soft, forced laugh. You always did appreciate talent, Ethan. Ethan didn't even spare her another glance. Instead, he turned back to Emma. Come with me for a second. Emma hesitated. I should. The kitchen is running perfectly, he interrupted. Just a minute. Something in his voice made it impossible to say no. He led her toward the edge of the ballroom, away from the crowd. The lights were softer here, the hum of conversation fading slightly. Emma crossed her arms. What was that? Ethan raised an eyebrow. What? You just put me on a pedestal in front of that woman. He shrugged. Because it's true. Emma frowned. You don't have to. I don't say things I don't mean, Ethan said, his voice firm. The way he was looking at her made her stomach tighten. Like he saw her, really saw her. It was too much. She shook her head, stepping back. I should get back to work. Ethan didn't stop her, but as she walked away, she could feel his gaze following her. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted to run from it or toward it. Emma tried to shake off the lingering tension from her conversation with Ethan as she re-entered the kitchen. She needed to focus. The night wasn't over yet, and despite everything, despite him, she had a job to do. The kitchen was running smoothly, her team executing every dish to perfection. The feedback from the guests had been overwhelmingly positive, and the energy of the evening was electric. But even as she plated the final round of entrees, she couldn't ignore the way her heart was still racing from Ethan's words. She's not just the chef. She's the reason this entire night is a success. Why had he said that? Why had he defended her so fiercely, as if it actually mattered to him what people thought? Emma wasn't used to that. She wasn't used to someone stepping in on her behalf, standing beside her instead of dismissing her. She'd spent her whole life proving herself, making sure she never needed anyone to validate her worth. But Ethan, he had done it anyway, effortlessly, without hesitation. And that terrified her. Emma, her head snapped up at the sound of David, one of her sous chefs. Yeah? You okay? He gave her a knowing look. You've been standing there, staring at the same plate for the last minute. Emma blinked, then quickly set the plate aside, shaking herself out of her thoughts. I'm fine, just making sure everything is perfect. David smirked. It's already perfect. And in case you haven't noticed, everyone out there thinks so too. She exhaled. Good. The night continued without a hitch. Dessert was served, and soon enough, the evening was winding down. The guests were mingling, laughing, praising the event as a complete success. Emma should have felt satisfied, proud. Instead, she felt restless. She kept glancing toward the ballroom, catching glimpses of Ethan through the gaps in the crowd. He was standing among a group of executives, effortlessly commanding attention as he spoke. But every so often, he would glance toward the kitchen, toward her. Their eyes met once, just for a second. but it was enough to send a pulse of something sharp and unrelenting through her veins. She tore her gaze away, scolding herself internally. She was not going to let Ethan Callahan get into her head. Not now. Not ever. When the last of the guests finally began to leave, Emma instructed her team to start cleanup. She had just stepped out of the kitchen, ready to check on the final details, when a deep voice stopped her. Leaving without saying goodnight? She turned, already knowing who it was. Ethan stood a few feet away, his tie slightly loosened, his hands in his pockets. He looked different than he had earlier, less polished, more relaxed. Emma forced a small smile. I figured you were busy celebrating your big night. He tilted his head. You mean our big night? She hesitated. Ethan, I meant what I said earlier, he interrupted. Emma swallowed, glancing around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Why? His brows furrowed slightly. Why what? Why do you care? She asked, keeping her voice steady. What does it matter to you if people respect me or not? If they think I belong in a place like this? Ethan studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he said, Because I know what it's like to have people underestimate you. That stopped her cold. She frowned. You? A billionaire? Ethan let out a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it. You think I was always this? He gestured vaguely to himself, to the grand ballroom around them. People don't see the years I spent proving myself. They don't see how many times I had to fight to be taken seriously. They just see the money, the power, and assume it was always there. Emma didn't know what to say. She had always assumed Ethan had been born into this life, that he had never known anything else. But the way he spoke now, the weight in his voice, told her otherwise. I see the way people look at you, he continued, softer now. The way they assume you're just the help, but you're not. You're brilliant, and I won't stand there and let anyone look at you like you're less than that. Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at him, her mind scrambling for something, anything to say. But before she could, Ethan took a step closer. The air between them felt charged. Too much. She shook her head. Ethan, whatever this is, it's not a good idea. He didn't step back. Why not? Emma swallowed. Because I work for you. Because we come from two completely different worlds. Because I'm not. I can't. She stopped, exhaling shakily. Ethan studied her for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. Then he nodded, as if accepting her words. But before he turned to leave, he said something that sent a shiver down her spine. I think you're scared. Emma's breath caught. I think you know exactly what's happening here, he continued, voice impossibly calm. And I think you're terrified of what it means. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Ethan's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. That's okay, Emma. Take your time. Then, without another word, he walked away. Emma stood frozen in place, her pulse roaring in her ears. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to dismiss everything he had just said. But the worst part? Somewhere deep down, she knew he was right. Emma didn't sleep that night. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying Ethan's words over and over again. I think you're scared. It wasn't just what he said. It was the way he said it. Calm. Certain. Like he already knew the answer before she did. And the most infuriating part? He wasn't wrong. She was scared. scared of what it meant to let him in, scared of what she was starting to feel, scared that if she let herself believe, even for a second, that someone like Ethan Callahan could truly see her, it would all come crashing down. She had spent her whole life building walls. First, out of necessity, out of survival. Then, out of habit. She knew how to take care of herself, how to stand on her own 2 feet. She had never needed anyone before. But Ethan, he was different, and that terrified her. By morning, she was exhausted. She forced herself out of bed, made an extra strong coffee, and threw herself into work, hoping the distraction would keep her mind from spiraling any further. It didn't, because Ethan had made sure he was impossible to ignore. He wasn't at the restaurant that day, but he still managed to make his presence known. First, there was the phone call. "Morning, chef." His deep voice greeted her when she answered, far too smooth and relaxed for someone who had turned her world upside down the night before. Emma gripped her phone tightly. "Ethan, I wanted to check in." "Check in?" she repeated skeptically. "On what?" He paused, as if debating whether or not to push. "On you." Emma swallowed, gripping the counter. "I'm fine." "You sure?" "Yes," she said quickly. Too quickly. There was a beat of silence. Then his voice softened. "All right, I'll let you get back to it." "But Emma?" She closed her eyes. "What?" "You don't have to do everything alone." Her breath caught, but before she could respond, the line went dead. She let out a frustrated sigh, dropping her phone onto the counter. Damn him. The second thing Ethan did was even worse. That afternoon, a package arrived at the restaurant. Emma wasn't expecting anything, so when one of the servers handed it to her, she frowned. There was no note, just a sleek black box, tied with a ribbon. She hesitated before untying it, a strange sense of anticipation curling in her stomach. When she lifted the lid, she froze. Inside was a pristine white chef's coat, but not just any coat, her coat, the one she had ruined months ago, the one that had been beyond repair, the one that had mattered to her more than she ever admitted. Her hands trembled as she lifted it out of the box. It was exactly the same as before, the fabric, the stitching, the weight of it. But then she noticed something different. Her name was embroidered on the front in elegant cursive script. She sucked in a sharp breath. Ethan had done this. Somehow, without ever asking, without her even realizing, he had seen her. Not just in the way she worked, not just in the way she carried herself, but in the small, quiet details. And it unraveled something deep inside her. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, staring at the coat, before David's voice pulled her back. Emma." She looked up, startled. "Yeah?" David smirked. "Whoever sent that must really want to impress you." Emma flushed, quickly shoving the coat back into the box. "It's nothing." David raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. She spent the rest of the day trying to ignore the feeling in her chest, trying to pretend that Ethan Callahan didn't have the power to make her world tilt with just one thoughtful gesture. It didn't work. By the time she closed the restaurant that night, she knew she couldn't keep avoiding it, avoiding him. So instead of going home, she found herself standing outside his building, heart pounding, hands curled into fists at her sides. She didn't even remember making the decision to come here. It was like her body had moved before her mind could stop it. But now that she was here, staring up at the towering structure, reality hit her like a freight train. This was a mistake. She shouldn't be here. She should turn around and walk away before... Emma! She froze. The voice was familiar, deep. And when she turned, Ethan was there, standing just a few feet away. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, and his expression was unreadable as he studied her. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Emma opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't have an answer. At least, not one she was ready to say out loud. Ethan took a step closer. "Did you get the coat?" She swallowed hard. "Yeah." "And?" She exhaled, shaking her head. "And you didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "I see you, Emma," he continued, his voice low and steady. "I see how hard you work, how much you give, and I don't want you to think for a second that you're not worth being looked after too." Something inside her cracked. She hated how easily he could get under her skin, how he made her feel things she had spent years locking away. But even as her brain screamed at her to leave, her body stayed rooted in place. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that someone like Ethan Callahan could actually care. For a long moment, they just stood there. Then finally, Emma whispered, "I don't know how to do this." Ethan's expression softened. "Neither do I." Her breath hitched. "But I'd like to figure it out," he added, his gaze never leaving hers. "With you." Emma stared at him, her chest tightening. For so long, she had convinced herself that love, real love, wasn't for people like her, that it was something reserved for others. But Ethan? He made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong. Emma didn't know how long she stood there, staring at Ethan, before she finally found her voice. "You really mean that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan took another step forward, close enough now that she could see the flicker of uncertainty in his usually unreadable eyes. "I don't say things I don't mean, Emma," he murmured. "I want to be here, with you." A lump formed in her throat. This was terrifying. Letting someone in after years of keeping her walls up, trusting that he wouldn't leave, that he wouldn't let her down. But then she thought about everything Ethan had done, the way he kept showing up, the way he saw her even when she tried to hide, the way he had made her feel more alive in the past few weeks than she had in years. And maybe it was time she stopped running. She took a shaky breath. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's figure it out." For a second, Ethan didn't react. Then, slowly, a small, almost relieved smile appeared on his lips. "Good," he said simply. And just like that, something shifted. The tension that had been building between them for so long softened into something new, something fragile, but real. Emma didn't know what this meant for them. She didn't know if she was ready for all of it, but she knew she wanted to try. And for now, that was enough. Ethan didn't push for more that night. He didn't try to define whatever this was. Instead, he walked her home. It was late, the city quieter than usual, the streetlights casting a soft glow on the pavement. They walked in comfortable silence, side by side, until they reached the small apartment she shared with her brother. Emma hesitated at the door, turning to face him. "Do you want to come in?" she asked before she could overthink it. Ethan's expression was unreadable for a moment. Then he shook his head. "Not tonight." Something in her chest deflated, but before she could react, he reached out, brushing his fingers gently against hers. "I don't want to rush this," he said softly. "I just want to be with you, however you'll have me." Emma swallowed, her heart thudding against her ribs. She didn't know how he did it, how he always seemed to say the exact thing she needed to hear before she even knew she needed to hear it. She nodded. "Okay." Ethan squeezed her hand once, then took a step back. "Good night, Emma." She watched as he turned and walked away, disappearing down the street. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. The next few days passed in a strange haze. Ethan didn't push, didn't demand more than she was ready to give. But he was there. Always there. He came to the restaurant every morning for coffee. He called her late at night just to talk, just to hear her voice. And in between it all, he found small, quiet ways to remind her that she wasn't alone. At first, it terrified her. But then slowly, she started to let herself believe that maybe this could be real. That maybe, for once, she didn't have to do everything on her own. One evening, after the dinner rush had died down, she stepped outside for some air. The night was crisp, a light breeze cutting through the warm glow of the city lights. She leaned against the railing of the restaurant's back patio, letting herself breathe. "You look like you're thinking too much," a familiar voice said behind her. Emma turned, unsurprised to find Ethan standing there, hands in his pockets, watching her with that knowing look of his. She smirked. "I always think too much." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth despite the cool air. "Want to tell me what's on your mind?" She hesitated, then sighed. "I guess I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked down, kicking at an invisible spot on the ground. "Things like this, they don't happen to people like me, Ethan. Good things. People sticking around. It doesn't last." For a moment, Ethan didn't say anything. Then gently, he reached out, tilting her chin up so she had no choice but to look at him. "I'm not going anywhere, Emma," he said, his voice steady. "Not unless you tell me to." Her breath caught. It was such a simple statement, such a simple promise. And yet, for someone who had spent her whole life waiting for people to leave, it meant everything. She swallowed hard. "I don't want you to go," she admitted, the words tasting unfamiliar but right. Ethan smiled softly. "Then I won't." Emma let out a shaky breath, feeling something inside her settle for the first time in a long time. Maybe she didn't have to do this alone. Maybe, for once, she could let someone in. Maybe, just maybe, she could let herself be happy. Emma had spent so much of her life running from disappointment, from heartbreak, from the fear that if she let herself believe in something good, it would eventually be taken away. But with Ethan, running didn't feel like an option anymore. Because no matter how hard she tried to push him away, he always found a way back to her. And the scariest part? She wanted him to. But knowing that didn't erase her doubts. The restaurant was busier than usual that evening, the hum of conversation filling the air as Emma moved between tables, taking orders and managing the chaos. She had barely had a second to breathe when she felt a familiar presence near the entrance. Ethan. He leaned against the doorway, watching her with that patient, knowing look of his. He had been coming in every night lately, always waiting until the rush died down so they could steal a few moments together. It had become their unspoken routine, something that felt as steady as the sun rising each morning. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding and walked over. "You stalking me, Carter?" she teased, a smirk playing on her lips as she wiped her hands on her apron. He grinned. "Just making sure you don't forget to take a break." Emma raised an eyebrow. "I don't take breaks." Ethan hummed, as if he had already expected that answer. Then, without another word, he reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. The contact sent a shiver down her spine. "You do now," he murmured. Her heart pounded as he led her outside, away from the noise and the crowd. The cool night air wrapped around them as they stepped into the quiet alley behind the restaurant. For a moment, they just stood there, hands still linked, neither one speaking. Then Ethan turned to her, his expression more serious than she was used to. "What's going on, Emma?" She frowned. "What do you mean? You've been different lately," he said softly. "Distant." Emma swallowed hard. She knew he had noticed. She had been pulling back, afraid of the way he made her feel, afraid of how much she wanted this, wanted him. She looked away, her fingers tightening around his without realizing it. "I don't know how to do this, Ethan." "Do what?" "Let someone in," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent so long convincing myself that people always leave, that it's safer not to get too close. And then you." She broke off, shaking her head. "You make me want to believe in something I'm not sure I know how to believe in." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When she finally gathered the courage to look at him, she expected frustration or disappointment. But there was none of that. Instead, there was something softer, something that made her chest ache. "Emma," he said, his voice steady. "You don't have to have it all figured out right now. I'm not asking for perfect. I just want you, however you'll have me." She felt something break inside her, something that had been holding her back, keeping her from fully stepping into this. Because that was the thing about Ethan. He never asked for more than she was ready to give. And maybe, for once, she could stop fighting this. She took a shaky breath and nodded. "Okay." Ethan searched her face, as if making sure she really meant it. Then slowly, he raised his hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing over her skin. Her heart pounded as he leaned in, his lips hovering just inches from hers. He was giving her a choice, one last chance to pull away. But she didn't. Instead, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips against his in a kiss that felt like 1,000 unspoken words. Ethan responded instantly, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her closer. His lips were warm, patient, and when she sighed into the kiss, he deepened it, stealing the breath from her lungs. Emma wasn't sure how long they stood there, lost in each other. But by the time they pulled apart, her world had completely shifted. She rested her forehead against his, breathing heavily. "I think I'm in trouble," she murmured. Ethan chuckled. "You and me both." And for the first time, Emma didn't mind one bit. Emma had spent so much of her life trying to protect herself from disappointment. But with Ethan, she was learning that some things were worth the risk. The days following their kiss felt different, as if the world had shifted in a way she couldn't quite explain. Ethan was still Ethan, teasing her, showing up at the restaurant when she least expected it, watching her like he saw something in her that even she couldn't see. But now there was something more between them, something unspoken yet undeniable. One evening, after closing up the restaurant, she found him waiting for her outside, leaning against his car with that signature smirk. "Do you ever go home?" she teased, crossing her arms. "I could ask you the same thing," he countered. "Come on, I have something to show you." Emma hesitated. "It's late, Ethan." "So?" He held open the passenger door, challenging her. "Afraid?" She rolled her eyes, but got in the car. "If this is how I get kidnapped, I want you to know that it's entirely your fault." Ethan chuckled as he drove, the city lights flashing past them. After about 20 minutes, he pulled into an empty parking lot near the outskirts of town. Confused, Emma followed him as he led her through a small wooded area until they reached an open clearing. The sight stole her breath. The city stretched out below them, glowing against the dark night sky. It was beautiful, quiet, a world away from the chaos of her everyday life. Ethan watched her reaction. "This is my favorite place," he admitted. "When things get too loud, I come here." Emma turned to him. "And you brought me here because you needed it," he said simply. She stared at him, feeling her heart tighten. No one had ever looked at her and known what she needed without her saying a word. Ethan sat down on the grass, patting the spot beside him. "Come on. Don't make me enjoy this view alone." She hesitated for only a second before sitting next to him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it was the most peaceful Emma had felt in a long time. Then Ethan turned to her, his expression more serious. "Tell me something, Emma. If you could have anything, absolutely anything, what would it be?" She exhaled, thinking. "I used to dream about having my own cafe, a place that was mine, where I could create something lasting." She shook her head. "But dreams like that aren't for people like me." Ethan frowned. "Why not?" She gave him a look. "Because I don't have millions lying around, for starters." "So what?" he said. "You have talent, work ethic, and a way of making people feel like they belong. That's more valuable than money." Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You make it sound so easy." "I never said it was easy," he admitted. "But just because something is hard doesn't mean it's impossible." She looked away. "It doesn't matter. I don't even know where I'd start." Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folder. "Maybe with this?" Emma frowned and took it from him. When she opened it, her breath hitched. A lease. For a cafe space with her name on it. She looked up at him in shock. "Ethan, what is this?" He shrugged, like it was no big deal. "It's a start." Emma shook her head, standing up. "No, absolutely not. You can't just—" "Why not?" he interrupted, standing too. "Emma, you said it yourself. This is your dream." She was shaking now, overwhelmed. "And what? You think you can just fix my life by throwing money at it?" "That's not what this is," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not handing you anything. I'm giving you a chance. You'll do the work. You'll make the decisions. I just took care of the first step." Emma felt her throat tighten. "I can't take this, Ethan. I don't want to owe you." His expression softened. "Then don't. Consider it an investment in you." Her chest ached, because this wasn't just about the cafe. It was about everything. About trust. About letting herself believe that someone could care about her without expecting something in return. She exhaled shakily. "You're insane, you know that?" He grinned. "I've been told." Emma stared at the papers, her mind racing. Fear and excitement warred inside her. But one thing was clear. This was real. And terrifying as it was, she wanted it. She looked up at Ethan, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself hope. "Okay," she whispered. His smile was slow, but it was real. "Okay." And just like that, her life changed forever. Emma never thought her life would change so drastically, all because of one mistake, one accidental hug at an airport that led her down a path she never could have imagined. Looking back, it seemed almost ridiculous how much had changed in such a short time. She went from working long hours at a cafe, barely making ends meet, to running her own business, standing side by side with a man who saw something in her that no one else ever had. But more than anything, she had learned that life was unpredictable, and sometimes the most unexpected moments led to the greatest blessings. Opening the cafe had not been easy. There were late nights, early mornings, days when she doubted herself, and moments when she thought about giving up. But every time she felt overwhelmed, Ethan was there. He never tried to solve her problems for her, never made her feel like she owed him anything. He simply stood by her, supporting her, believing in her in a way that made her start to believe in herself. The cafe became more than just a business. It became a place where people gathered, where strangers became friends, where laughter and conversation filled the air. It was a reminder that dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed, were always within reach if you were willing to fight for them. And Emma had fought. She had fought against doubt, against fear, against the belief that she wasn't good enough. And in the end, she had won. But perhaps the greatest lesson Emma learned wasn't about success or hard work. It was about love. Love had always been something she kept at a distance. She had seen too many people get hurt, had experienced loss in ways that made her believe it was safer to guard her heart. But Ethan had changed that. He had shown her that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about choosing someone every single day. It was about showing up, even when things were difficult. It was about trust, about vulnerability, about letting someone in even when it was terrifying. And so, when Ethan got down on one knee in the middle of her cafe one evening, in front of friends, family, and customers who had become part of her journey, she didn't hesitate. She didn't let fear dictate her choices anymore. "Yes," she said, without a single doubt in her heart. There were cheers, laughter, and more love than she had ever known. It wasn't the kind of fairy tale she had imagined as a little girl. It was better, because it was real. It was built on trust, on partnership, on a journey that had begun with an accident but turned into something neither of them could live without. Emma's story is proof that life doesn't always go as planned, but sometimes the best things happen when we least expect them. She was just a woman trying to survive, working tirelessly to build a future for herself, and then suddenly, everything changed. Not because someone came along and saved her, but because someone believed in her enough to make her see what she was capable of. And maybe that's the real message here. We all have moments where we feel stuck, where we think we're meant for nothing more than what life has given us. We convince ourselves that our dreams are too big, that we aren't worthy of something better. But the truth is, we are. We are all capable of more than we know. Sometimes, all it takes is one opportunity, one person who refuses to let us give up on ourselves. Emma took that chance. She embraced the unknown, even when it terrified her. And because of that, she found success, love, and a life she never could have imagined. So maybe the question isn't whether we're lucky enough to stumble into a moment that changes everything. Maybe the real question is, will we be brave enough to embrace it when it comes? What did you think of Emma and Ethan's journey? Did their story inspire you? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to hear more emotional, uplifting stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's so much more to come, and we can't wait to share it with you. See you in the next